Number 6. Adriana Mesa. Mexico's underworld has a new formidable figure in the form of Adriana Mesa Torres, who earned her nickname Cartel Queen. She's the daughter-in-law of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera, the notorious Sinaloa cartel boss, and the wife of Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a member of Los Chapitos, a significant faction within the cartel. Mesa Torres, reportedly in her early 30s, has risen to prominence as a queen pin within the Los Chapitos wing of the Sinaloa cartel, wielding considerable influence over the drug empire. Her notoriety extends to her social media presence, where she showcases a lavish lifestyle through flashy posts and videos on platforms like TikTok. And in a bold assertion of her newfound authority, she proudly identifies herself as the boss's wife. Her involvement in the Mexican drug cartel came to light in 2019 when her husband Ovidio was initially arrested. This revelation prompted authorities to freeze her bank accounts, recognizing her role in the cartel's day-to-day operations. While El Chapo is known to have 23 children, only Ovidio and his 3 brothers, collectively known as Los Chapitos, have played significant roles in the Sinaloa cartel's operations. Ovidio's arrest in Sinaloa in January 2023 led to deadly confrontations with the army, resulting in the loss of 29 lives, including 10 Mexican troops. Mesa Torres' ties to the world of drug trafficking extends beyond her marriage and her family history. She's not just a narco queen, but is considered narco royalty, with her father, Raul Mesa Ontiveros, known as LM6, being a high-ranking leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Her father's life ended in a shootout in Culiacan, Sinaloa in 2007, and tragically her brother, Cesar Raul, also met a similar fate, losing his life in an armed confrontation at the age of 18. LM6 had previous connections to El Chapo's former right-hand man, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, serving as El Mayo's most trusted lieutenant. However, Mesa Torres' marriage to El Chapo's son catapulted her into the ranks of women rising within the cartel. Reports indicate that Ovidio Guzman Lopez, her husband, oversees the Sinaloa cartel's fentanyl division. The U.S. State Department has previously stated that he produces more than 3,000 kilos of methamphetamine each month. The 4 sons of El Chapo, collectively known as Los Chapitos, assumed leadership roles within the Sinaloa cartel following their father's arrest and extradition to the U.S. Under their guidance, the cartel remains one of Mexico's most potent drug cartels, consolidating its power and influence in the criminal underworld. Number 5. Stacy Caster. In the year 2000, Stacy Caster, a New York-born woman, gained notoriety as the Black Widow due to her involvement in a series of gruesome murders. Her dangerous actions and sinister intent left a trail of death and devastation behind her. Her first victim was her husband, Michael Wallace, whom she married in 1998. In the year 2000, Michael tragically passed away, initially attributed to a heart attack. However, years later, when his body was exhumed for a toxicology screening, investigators uncovered a chilling truth. Michael had been poisoned with antifreeze. This revelation not only cast suspicion on Stacy regarding Michael's death, but also raised alarms about her second husband, David Caster. Stacy and David, who worked together in his air conditioning installation and repair company, married in 2003. But on August 22, 2005, David was found dead in their home. Initially ruled as a self-inflicted death, a thorough police investigation uncovered the gruesome reality. David, like Michael, had fallen victim to antifreeze poisoning. In September 2007, Stacy took her malevolence a step further by attempting to frame her own daughter, Ashley, for the deaths of her 2 husbands. She plotted to murder Ashley and stage it as if she'd done it herself, even drafting a fraudulent confession to be found with Ashley's lifeless body. One night, she served Ashley an alcoholic drink laced with a lethal dose of painkillers. Fortunately, though, Ashley was found the next morning by her younger sister, Bree, who rushed her to the hospital. In the face of questioning by authorities regarding the forged suicide note and the deaths of her father and stepfather, Ashley maintained her innocence. Stacy was subsequently arrested and faced a slew of charges, including second-degree murder, second-degree attempted murder, and a plot to present a forged will. In February 2009, she was found guilty of second-degree murder for David's poisoning and attempted second-degree murder of Ashley, and as a result, she received a sentence of 51 years to life in prison in March 2009. Throughout her legal ordeal, Stacy vehemently denied her involvement in the crimes. She adamantly proclaimed her innocence, stating, "I did not kill Michael Wallace. I did not kill David Caster. I did not try to kill my daughter, period. And I will never say that I did, ever." Tragically, Stacy's dark saga took another turn when she was found dead from a heart attack in her jail cell on June 11, 2016, at the young age of 48. Authorities ruled out foul play in her demise, marking the end of a disturbing and dangerous chapter in her life. Number 4. Shante Henderson. Shante Henderson is a convicted killer, and as of 2022, she remains incarcerated. Her conviction stems from the homicide of DeAndre Parker. So, let's delve into her criminal history and arrests chronologically. On September 2, 2006, Henderson was involved in a fatal incident. She shot and killed DeAndre Parker at a gas station in Kansas City, Missouri, claiming that Parker was attempting to run her over with his truck. Initially charged with second-degree murder and armed criminal action, she was subsequently acquitted of the murder charges, but was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter and armed criminal action. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Shante Henderson found herself on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in 2007 as she became a fugitive on the run. But she was apprehended by the FBI on March 31, 2007, after less than 24 hours on the list. The FBI had offered a substantial reward of $100,000 for information leading to her capture. And for her involvement in Parker's death, she was sentenced to 10 years behind bars. In October 2011, Henderson pleaded guilty to the possession of a firearm classified as felonious, and as a result, she received a 7-year federal prison sentence without the possibility of parole in April 2012. She served her sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Waseca. As of 2022, Shante Henderson is still incarcerated for her involvement in the homicide of DeAndre Parker. She's currently held at the Women's Eastern Reception, Diagnostics and Correctional Center in Vandalia, Missouri. Henderson's 17-year prison sentence is the result of her 2006 homicide conviction, which is set to run consecutively to her previous 7-year federal sentence. This means that her earliest possible release date is expected to be in 2029. In addition to her criminal history, it's worth noting that the convict is also known by her aliases Rashida Smith and Rashida Washington. Number 3. Myra Hindley. Myra Hindley was an infamous English serial killer who, in collaboration with Ian Brady, committed a series of horrific crimes that shook the nation. Born in Manchester on July 23, 1942, she grew up with her grandmother and converted to Roman Catholicism after the tragic drowning of a close friend when she was just 15. Then, in 1961, she met a man who had recently been released from prison named Ian Brady, and she quickly fell under his complete control. Together, they embarked on a spree of assault and murder that claimed the lives of 5 innocent children. In July 1963, they committed their first murder when they killed Pauline Reed. And just 4 months later, 12-year-old John Kilbride disappeared and was never seen again. The next year, in June 1964, 12-year-old Keith Bennett met the same fate. And on Boxing Day 1964, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey vanished from a local fairground. The police were alerted to the gruesome crimes in October 1965 when Myra Hindley's 17-year-old brother-in-law, David Smith, bravely came forward. Smith had witnessed Brady brutally murder 17-year-old Edward Evans with an axe, but had initially concealed the horrifying truth out of fear. However, he eventually went to the police, revealing Brady's confession that more bodies were buried on Saddleworth Moor. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady faced trial on April 27, 1966, where they pleaded not guilty to the murders of Evans, Downey, and Kilbride. Brady was found guilty of the murders of Downey, Kilbride, and Evans, while Hindley was only found guilty of the murders of Downey and Evans. She was also charged with harboring Brady, knowing that he'd killed Kilbride, and as a result, both Hindley and Brady were sentenced to life in prison. In 1970, Hindley severed ties with Brady and began a lifelong campaign to regain her freedom, all the while maintaining her innocence. It wasn't until 1987 that she confessed to her own involvement in all 5 murders, sparking renewed media attention. Despite her confession, her applications for parole were repeatedly denied. Myra Hindley passed away on November 16, 2002, in prison, succumbing to respiratory failure. She basically spent her entire life behind bars, serving a life sentence for her role in one of the most notorious crime sprees in British history. Number 2. Kim Yo Jong. Kim Yo Jong, the influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, recently made headlines with her stern warning to South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. She told him to shut his mouth. This response followed Yoon's offer of economic aid to North Korea in exchange for nuclear disarmament. In a newly released book, the sister, North Korea's Kim Yo Jong, the most dangerous woman in the world, South Korean scholar Sung Yoon Lee delves into Kim Yo Jong's ascension within the North Korean regime. The novel placed her as the de facto deputy leader and a potential future paramount leader of a nuclear-armed state. Kim Yo Jong's role as a key figure in North Korea's power structure is long overdue for closer examination. Lee, a professor specializing in Korean studies, draws upon his deep expertise in Korean peninsular politics to provide a comprehensive portrait of Kim Yo Jong. He attended the International School of Geneva alongside Kim Jong-nam, Kim Yo Jong's half-brother, lending a unique perspective to his analysis. Lee's book is a meticulously researched narrative accompanied by helpful visuals like a family tree and character chart. More importantly, Lee doesn't hide his disdain for Kim Yo Jong, whom he deems the most dangerous woman in the world, due to her involvement in her brother's oppressive actions against the North Korean population. Lee initiates Kim Yo Jong's story by discussing the Mount Paektu bloodline, an official North Korean term used in propaganda to establish the ruling dynasty's legitimacy. This dynasty, which has governed North Korea for over 7 decades, traces its origins to Kim Il-sung, Kim Yo Jong's grandfather and the country's founder. Lee characterizes this narrative as fictitious, serving as the ideological foundation for the Kim family's rule. By linking the Kim family's imaginary beginnings to Mount Paektu, a mountain laden with mythical significance in Korean culture, the family extends this mythical power to themselves. This in part explains their elevated status in North Korea's strict class hierarchy, where birth plays a decisive role. North Korea's class system, known as Songbun, or birth status, categorizes individuals into the core class, the wavering class, and the hostile class, along with numerous subclasses. Your position within this hierarchy, as Lee notes, determines various aspects of your life, including where you live, your education, job, and food rations. The core class consists of North Korean elites and trusted regime supporters, while laborers, farmers, and business owners belong to the wavering class, which is subject to general surveillance. The hostile class includes repatriated Koreans from Japan, defectors, and religious individuals. This deeply ingrained system reinforces the Kim family's rule and the stark divisions within North Korean society. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Maria Chata Leon. Maria Chata Leon, a notorious figure in the criminal underworld, was at the center of a chilling world of crime, violence, and human smuggling in Southern California. Her involvement in a sprawling criminal empire characterized by drug dealing and murder had earned her a formidable reputation. And in the wake of a violent gun battle in Los Angeles, where a gang member was killed, Maria Leon was faced with a dilemma. She was stuck in Mexicali, and her son, Danny Clever Leon, who died in the shootout with the police in 2008, was set to be buried in the United States. With a lengthy rap sheet in the US, her only way to attend a funeral was to tap into her extensive criminal network. Maria Leon's world was one where gang members and human smugglers collaborated closely. Those smuggled across the border were often left with the task of paying off their debts by dealing drugs on the streets. Maria Leon's criminal operations extended across the border, with her family's stronghold being a heavily fortified compound on Drew Street in Los Angeles. The neighborhood was transformed into a nightmarish place filled with violence and fear, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to dislodge her and her family. The elaborate story of Maria Leon's criminal activities came to light when her son, Francisco Real, contacted Eduardo Alvarez Marquez for a special job. Alvarez Marquez was a key figure behind a human smuggling ring. They needed to get Maria Leon back across the border for her son's funeral, and the options were limited, including scaling the border fence or swimming through the polluted New River. In the end, though, they chose the fastest option, jumping. However, unbeknownst to them, federal authorities were listening to their conversations through wiretaps, uncovering a web of human smuggling and other criminal activities. Alvarez Marquez would later plead guilty to charges related to conspiracy and smuggling. The wiretap transcripts provided insight into the criminal operations, including guiding immigrants over the border fence and leading them through the port of entry with fake documents. While Maria Leon served time in federal prison, many others in her gang pleaded guilty and received shorter sentences. Francisco Real cooperated with investigators and testified against former gang members, and as a result, the Drew Street compound was eventually torn down, bringing an end to an era marked by violence and criminal enterprise. Maria Leon's story is a reminder of the invisible realities that some gang members and smugglers create on both sides of the US-Mexico border, evading capture for the crimes they commit. It serves as a chilling portrayal of the dangerous and complex world of organized crime in Southern California. Number 9. Sheldon Sing. In 2022, an Australian father of two named Sheldon Sing crashed his BMW into 3 parked cars in Sydney while his terrified kids were in the back seat. Sadly, this wasn't a completely unavoidable accident. Sing told police he had only had 1 glass of wine that night, but he blew over 5 times the legal limit for driving during a breathalyzer test. In footage of his conversation with police officers, he could be heard saying he was one of them and that he had worked with police before. It was later revealed that Sing once had a contract to fix cop cars, but the job was over and that it definitely didn't make him a member of the police department. During the video, he could also be heard bragging about how he could get out of the drunk driving charges he was being arrested for. In his own words, he said, "I've gotten off before, I'll get off again." Sing apparently failed to realize how lucky he was that only one of the occupants of the cars he slammed into was injured in the process. It was also lucky that the injuries were minor, considering how much worse the situation could have been. This wasn't exactly his first rodeo either. 3 years earlier, he had been charged with high-range drink driving. He escaped that case without a conviction, which is probably part of the reason he acted so cocky when he was caught again. Unfortunately, he managed to get off easy this time too. While the judge overseeing the case denied Sing's request to drop the charges altogether, he received a measly 12-month sentence. In what many would consider a slap on the wrist considering his outrageous behavior, he was ordered to perform 150 hours of community service and pay a small $150 fine. He was also banned from driving for 9 months. Number 8. Clyde Hedrick. 29-year-old Ellen Beeson went missing in Galveston County, Texas, during July 1984. 6 months later, one of her friends convinced a man she was last seen together with, Clyde Hedrick, to take her to see her friend. She was horrified after realizing that Beeson was dead and had been left along a remote dirt road under a pile of rotten garbage. Another 6 months after this, Beeson's friend told law enforcement where the missing woman's body was. Her reasons for waiting so long are unknown, but it's possible she was afraid of Clyde Hedrick. It's believed that he may have even threatened to hurt or kill her if she told anyone where the victim's body was. By then, Beeson's remains were already skeletal, and a medical examiner was unable to determine the cause and manner of death. Hedrick told investigators that Beeson drowned in a pond while they were skinny dipping one night, that he didn't notice until she was gone for good. He claimed that he didn't tell anyone of her death because he was worried police would accuse him of foul play. And he was right, of course. Many people suspected Hedrick of killing Beeson, especially considering his extensive criminal history. But in the absence of better evidence, he was only convicted of abusing a corpse in 1996 and spent just 1 year behind bars. In 2014, medical experts found new evidence with updated technology and reclassified Beeson's death as a homicide via drowning with a blunt force trauma to the head. At that point, her family had been fighting over 30 years for justice. Authorities charged Hedrick with murder, but in another disappointing setback, he was found guilty of the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison, but was released after serving only 8 due to an old state law that reduced prisoners' sentences based on good behavior. While the law was revised a few years ago to be less generous toward violent offenders, it was applied to the 40-year-old case, which predated the stricter legislation. Hedrick is now on a GPS monitoring device until 2033 and was living in a halfway house, according to the most recent update on his case. His release represents a far cry from justice for Ellen Beeson, but to make matters worse, many people think Hedrick killed a handful of other women. Since the 1970s, at least 30 bodies belonging mainly to female victims have been found in a remote area not far from where Beeson was murdered. The dumping ground, nicknamed the Texas Killing Fields, served as a go-to spot for the region's sickest predators to dispose of their victims' bodies. Sadly, not all of the women discovered there have even been identified, and many of the cases remain cold to this day. Knowing Hedrick could have been responsible for some of those victims, society was outraged by his early release. He has insisted that he didn't kill anyone at all, but the court of public opinion won't be satisfied until his involvement, or lack thereof, is fully proven, one way or another. Number 7. Catherine Hoggle. Catherine Hoggle and her 2 children mysteriously vanished from Montgomery County, Maryland back in 2014. Authorities tracked Catherine down a few days later, but for some reason she didn't have her kids with her, and they haven't been seen since. Even after extensive searches failed to find any evidence, investigators concluded that Catherine must have done something horrible and charged her with 2 counts of first-degree murder. For the next 8 years, Hoggle's mental state sat at the center of the case, as prosecutors and defense attorneys argued over whether or not she was competent enough to stand trial. During that time, she was held in a secured psychiatric facility. Her lawyer, David Felsen, claimed his client was too delusional to participate in her defense. He described Hoggle as a profoundly ill, paranoid schizophrenic. The court repeatedly deemed the woman incompetent and unrestorable, despite prosecutors' allegations that she was exaggerating the severity of her mental issues and simply refusing to cooperate or face the consequences of what she did. They tried convincing the judge to reverse the decision and find Hoggle mentally fit, but it never actually happened. Under Maryland law, there's a 5-year statute of limitations on prosecuting defendants who are deemed mentally incompetent. When that deadline came, the judge overseeing the case dropped the murder charges instead of honoring the prosecution's request to charge her. Hoggle was instead sentenced indefinitely to a psychiatric hospital, which means that she could see freedom again someday if her mental health gets to the point where she's no longer considered a threat to society. Troy Turner, the children's father, was understandably frustrated by the ruling. In a statement to NBC Washington, he criticized the broken system that, in his words, gives a murderer more rights than their victims. Number 6. Alexander Valenzuela. A young woman named Siana Chichi Castro's life was cut short back in 2021 when she was fatally shot in the head at the home of her 20-year-old boyfriend, Alexander Valenzuela, in Houston, Texas. The young man called 911 and initially told police that the shooting was a complete accident. but there were inconsistencies with his stories, according to multiple responding deputies, and Valenzuela soon stopped cooperating altogether. He was eventually charged with his lover's murder. Authorities never revealed much about what led up to the shooting. To add to the mystery already surrounding the case, Valenzuela took a generous plea deal that saw him convicted of aggravated assault on a family member, as well as serious bodily injury. He was sentenced to only 90 days at the Harris County Jail, something the victim's mother, Dulcie Rodriguez, was not expecting at all. She was so shocked by the light punishment that she struggled to hold back her emotions and was ordered to quiet down in the courtroom. Castro's father was escorted out of the room too, thanks to his reaction to Valenzuela's sentence. Without knowing much about the circumstances surrounding the shooting, it's hard to say with certainty that this was a case of injustice. At the same time, someone shot a gun and a young woman was killed. It's hard to imagine that resorting to gunfire was appropriate in the situation, especially since the defendant didn't assert any claims of self-defense. In addition to serving a short stint in jail, Valenzuela was sentenced to 6 years of supervision and ordered to attend a behavioral treatment program for 45 days. Number 5. Andrew Cashu. By the time he reached adulthood, Andrew Cashu was already a full-fledged gangster. In 2015, he fatally shot a 41-year-old man named Louis Amela during a robbery outside a California restaurant. Amela had no chance of escaping since 2 of Cashu's associates pinned him to the ground, but he fought for his life until the young man fired 2 life-ending bullets into his back. Cashu was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder. Because of his age, he would start out his term at a young offenders facility. The plan was to transfer him to an adult prison when he turned 25, after holding a hearing to determine if he should stay in custody. But when that day came, Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney Alyssa Blair declined to present any evidence to support Cashu's continued incarceration. So he walked free in late 2021, after serving only 6 years for killing a man. Just months after Cashu's release, deputies responded to a report of a person passed out in their car, blocking traffic lanes, and found him asleep behind the wheel with a gun. Cashu quickly woke up after realizing the cops were at the scene and sped away, leading law enforcement on a brief vehicle chase before he crashed his car and escaped on foot. He ditched his gun during the chase, but deputies managed to find it. They also caught up and took him into custody on 11 charges, including evading arrest, unlawful possession of a firearm, and driving under the influence. Attorney Kathy Cady, who represents Louis Amela's family, said that Cashu shouldn't have been out on the streets at all when he caught his latest batch of charges. She blamed Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon and his heavily left-leaning reform policies for freeing Cashu and giving him the chance to commit more crimes. In a statement, Gascon said that his office was disappointed to learn Cashu wasn't getting the support that he so clearly needs. The DA vowed to hold the young man accountable as an adult under the law. He also denied having any influence on the troubled gangster's release from prison, claiming that Cashu's freedom resulted from a required hearing and implied that his office lacked a strong enough case to keep him locked up. Cady later told Fox News that Gascon's statement was riddled with falsehoods and said the district attorney was badly mistaken or being misled or ignorant. She described his claims as entirely ridiculous. Number 4. Zoe Ren. A new mom named Caitlin Hunt was walking in downtown Woodstock, Georgia, with her daughter and family friend Kathy Deming one afternoon back in 2017, when a Jeep suddenly plowed into the group, killing all 3 victims. The trio had traveled to the area from Florida in order to escape the life-threatening effects of Hurricane Irma, only to have their lives ripped away from them despite their efforts. The driver, Zoe Ren, wasn't drunk or speeding at the time of the crash, leading investigators to suspect that she was simply distracted by something. She denied the allegation and claimed she had her eyes on the road the entire time, but didn't see the pedestrians who were reportedly wearing dark clothes after sunset and walking in an area without a crosswalk. Reardon was charged with 8 misdemeanors in connection to the case. She maintained that she wasn't distracted while driving, but ultimately pleaded guilty to several misdemeanors so she could avoid a trial. The judge overseeing the case offered some leniency to Reardon since she was young, sparing her from jail time and sentencing her to just 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to perform some community service, lost her license for at least a year, and was fined $4,000. While handing down the punishment, the judge encouraged her to do at least some of her community service for a foundation dedicated against distracted driving, and he agreed to reduce her fine if she donated to non-profits for the cause. Reardon apologized at her sentencing hearing, but the victim's loved ones felt that she was insincere and showed a lack of remorse for her actions. One family member even said that a phone call from the young woman would have changed everything, while another relative acknowledged that her attorney probably advised her not to reach out, but said that the seemingly lenient consequences were an insult against accountability. Number 3. Isaac Turnbull. 24-year-old pizzeria worker and soon-to-be father Declan Lyons was stirring a large pot of sauce outside his workplace in Montpelier, Vermont in 2002 when someone fatally shot him in the head. Investigators failed to identify a suspect until a month later when Lyons' co-worker, 19-year-old Isaac Turnbull, confessed to the murder in front of multiple people during a house party. One of the partygoers then told Turnbull's mother, and she called the police on her son. During questioning, the young man denied any involvement in the shooting and just referred to Lyons as a really good buddy. People who knew the suspect and victim also described them as close friends, and both men were extremely well liked by all of their peers, making it difficult for authorities to pin a murder charge on Turnbull. Prosecutors also lacked a possible motive for the crime, but they ultimately decided to try the case anyway. Turnbull received mental treatment throughout the case, and his lawyer argued that his client only confessed to the shooting during the party because he wasn't in his right mind. Prosecutors tried to sway the jury by revealing the lies they caught Turnbull in, the conflicting stories he gave, and other inconsistencies that pointed toward a guilty verdict. The jury wasn't convinced, though, and acquitted Turnbull in 2004, so he walked free. Just 1 month later, he was taken back into custody after a 7-hour standoff with police. His mother called 911 during the early morning one day to report that her son was on a rampage, but it's unclear what led to the incident. Either way, the situation got sorted out, and for the next 7 years of his life, Turnbull kept a low profile. In a shocking twist that no one saw coming, he randomly went to the police in 2011 and confessed to killing Lyons. Turnbull reportedly said that he wanted to turn himself in, but authorities had no power to arrest or detain him thanks to double jeopardy laws that prohibit prosecutors from trying someone for the same crime twice. Attorney General William Sorrell told the Burlington Free Press that law enforcement had no choice but to cut him loose, stating, "You can go out on the courthouse steps and confess, and the state can't do anything." There have been no updates on the situation since then, and it's unclear what Turnbull is up to these days. Hopefully his guilt eats away at him every day. Number 2. Richard Heron. When Richard Heron and his girlfriend Bonnie Garland moved to separate states for college in the late 1970s, they tried to make their relationship long distance, but they grew apart, and after 2 years, Bonnie decided that she wanted to see other people. She wrote Heron a letter about it, but he wasn't ready to let her go yet. Heron convinced Garland to meet up with him at her parents' house in Scarsdale, New York, so they could talk. During the visit, Garland reiterated her desire to end their relationship. Her parents weren't aware that the two were having issues and had let Heron stay in their guest bedroom, but Garland told him he had to leave the next morning. While the young woman was sleeping that night, Heron snuck into her room and bludgeoned her to death with a hammer. He then stole the Garland family's car, drove to a town about 100 miles, 161 kilometers away, went inside a church and told the priest what he did. The priest called the police, who rushed to the Garlands' home and found Bonnie clinging on to life. She died a short while later from her injuries. Heron never denied committing the crime, yet the Yale and Catholic communities rallied around him, somehow believing his actions were simply the product of a rough childhood, treating him like a victim. Some people even went as far as implying that Garland was an upper-class snob who basically asked for what happened to her by trying to date other men, and that Heron had simply acted out of character. Authorities charged the young man with murder, but he was convicted of the lesser charge of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison, during which time he continued to receive support from his sympathizers. After his release in 1995, Heron moved to New Mexico and got a job working for a community mental health organization. Number 1. Oricon Prea Thefasadin na Ayodhya. In 2013, a young man named Ethan Couch became America's poster boy for affluenza after killing 4 people while driving drunk and avoiding prison time until he repeatedly violated his probation. In a lesser-known but disturbingly similar case that happened on the other side of the world a few years earlier in 2010, a wealthy young Thai woman named Oricon Prea Thefasadin na Ayodhya crashed into a bus and killed 9 innocent people in Bangkok. She wasn't drunk, but she was simply texting while driving, which is just as dangerous and irresponsible. The woman also didn't have a driver's license. Prea hit the bus along an elevated exit ramp. Several passengers were thrown from the vehicle and fell to their deaths on the roadway. The public was outraged when a photo snapped shortly after the accident showed Prea casually leaning against a highway barrier and texting on her phone as if she didn't care. To many, her lack of remorse seemed more than obvious. But Prea's privileged background seemed to speak volumes over her disturbingly aloof attitude in court. She was only convicted of driving without a license, despite the deadly consequences of her actions, and was not given any prison time. The court sentenced her to 3 years probation and 140 hours of community service, but she didn't seem very concerned with living up to the requirements of her infuriatingly light punishment. 4 years after the sentence, the press revealed that Prea had failed to report to her probation officer and hadn't even been taken to jail for it. She also hadn't followed through with her community service obligation. Prea claimed that she misunderstood the terms of the sentence and was given a second chance to fulfill the requirements, again without having to serve time behind bars. Nobody claims that the young woman didn't mean to hurt or kill anyone, but she never apologized or even slightly acknowledged her actions or the avoidable suffering and loss she caused. As of 2016, Prea had also allegedly not handed over any of the money she was ordered to pay to survivors of the accident and victims' families. If you became friends with a woman who you later found out was absolutely crazy and extremely dangerous, would you report her to the authorities right away? Or would you just slowly, over time, withdraw from the friendship and hope they leave you alone? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.